The way to be in the world is to orient yourself to the highest possible good you can conceive, because you don't have anything better to do. You also say that you encourage people to take on as much responsibility as they can, and because this constitutes a meaningful life. And this is, I find this quite interesting. You know what is meaningful because it is encoded into your body, the notion of meaningfulness.
Oh yeah.
And
it's the deepest of the higher instincts.
Yeah.
That's a good way of thinking about it.
My reading of this was that, now it's actually your reading, but what constitutes meaning is the right balance between chaos and order, and this is actually what you described as paradise on earth, being a walled garden where chaos, the chaotic potential, and the logos mediate supreme beauty. And
harmony is a good way of thinking about it, because people understand harmony because they listen to music. It's like, you listen to a piece of music you love, it's like, that's harmony. It's like, well, how would you like things to be like that? It's like, there's not a question. The fact that you love the piece of music means that you want things to be that way. It's direct. It's not mediated by cognition.
No, it's something else.
It is something else. It's absolutely something else.
When I first heard you say this sentence, orient yourself to the highest possible good you can conceive, I'd never thought of it that way. But when you just lay it out, it sounds really quite logical. Sounds like the most logical thing to do.
Yes.
But I never heard it in an articulated fashion like that.
Yeah.
I think you refer to Pinocchio when Geppetto he wishes upon the star, which is the highest
and asks
ideal.
for something impossible.
Yeah. Why does the highest possible good constitute meaning? And why do we feel this? Why do we feel when we're doing something meaningful?
Well, I think it's because we have a problem, right? We have the fall. That's the right way of thinking about it. We have chaos and tyranny, and we have evil. It's like, what do you do about that? You pursue the pathway that solves those problems. That's what the meaningful pathway does. And that's why it feels meaningful. It's like those actually are the problems. I've started to think, I thought for a long time, there are truths of drama and literature, and there are material truths of science. But there are times when those two align, and they're true literally and metaphysically, literally and metaphorically at the same time.
Yeah.
And the idea that being is a place of tragedy and evil is literally and metaphysically true and metaphorically true, both at the same time. And the idea that there's a way of dealing with those both at the same time, and that's meaningful, that's also literally and metaphorically true at the same time. Yeah. And the reason for that is that because it's true that our eternal enemies are tragedy and malevolence, we've adapted to them, and we can feel, so to speak, when we're contending with them properly. Yeah. And that feeling of contending with them properly is the feeling of meaning. Yeah. And so there you have it. And the meaning that's produced as a consequence of contending with those properly is the antidote to them at the same time. So, in the Christian story, of course, Christ voluntarily hoists his cross. Okay, so that means a lot of things at the same time. I mean, first of all, it's actually a heavy physical object. Second, it is something you have to hoist up into your shoulders. It's a genuine burden. So it's a genuine physical burden. But it's also a metaphysical burden, because at the same time that he hoists up his cross, he's accepting the burden of his death. And he's doing that, not only death, but suffering in death. And he's doing that voluntarily. It's like, that's the ticket, exactly that, is to do that voluntarily. It's like, there's no doubt, life is tragic and bounded by malevolence. No doubt about it. Accept it. Accept it. Accept it. Transcend it. And then you transmute it. That's what I've never recovered from that realization 30 years ago.
Which is a good thing.
Right, that's a good thing. But I would say in many ways I'm a deeply pessimistic person, because I'm very aware of the finitude of life and the suffering that's associated with it, acutely aware of that, and also of malevolence. And then I came across this process that's laid out as an antidote. It's like, tell the truth. Yeah. Orient yourself towards the highest good you can conceive of, and tell the truth, and that will work. And the strange thing is, it works. It's like, really, it works. Those are big problems. You might think they're so big that they have no solution. How could they have a solution? It's like, well, they have a solution. Isn't that something?
I think in one of your lectures you refer to, or you say, or you tell the crowd, and you make these gestures. You talk about alignment a lot, and you always make this gesture. I like that. You say, align your soul with the structure of being. But what does that mean?
Well, it means it's the same thing that you do when you're dancing with someone. So imagine an orchestra is playing.
Are you a good dancer?
I'm a pretty good dancer.
What style?
Well, I wouldn't exactly say that what I have is a style. I can dance with my wife, which is the crucial thing. You know, I mean, I'm good enough dancer so that she likes to dance with me, and she's actually a pretty good dancer, so that works out pretty well. So, and I listen to the music, so I guess maybe that's partly why I can dance, because I actually listen to the music. So imagine there's an orchestra. Okay, now you think about what the orchestra is doing, right? It's these people are hyper specialized, they're incredibly skilled, they all have their individual talent, they're all pushing the limit when they're really playing well, right? They're pushing the limits of their capability. And then they're organized into groups, strings, horns, etc. So there's the individual, but then there's the group, and then there's the aggregation of the group, and then there's the conductor, who's the king, right? And he's making sure that all of the skillful players play their part harmoniously. And then they're laying out pattern upon pattern upon pattern upon pattern, and they're modeling the structure of reality, because that's what reality is. It's pattern upon pattern upon pattern, all harmoniously, when it's working nicely. It's the music of the spheres. It's all harmony from the lowest subatomic level all the way up to the top, and that's what music is modeling. And then there's society, that's all the dancers, and they're all weaving in and out of each other's territory smoothly and without conflict, because they're paying attention. Yeah. And so that's society dancing to the tune that the king is conducting for the orchestra of being, right? And then there's the dyad, the two people, and they're paying attention to each other and matching their bodies to one another and delighting in the stacked harmony. Well, that's perfect, and people find that extremely enjoyable. It's because they're acting out the proper mode of being. They're dramatizing it, and people find that invigorating and refreshing, and you know, and beautiful, all of those things at the same time. And so that's a dramatized example of how you should live your life. And I mean should, I don't mean you should live your life this way. It's not that. It's that if you want to make things better, not worse, then that's the pathway. That's what I mean by should. It's not follow the rules, God damn it. I mean, there's some of that, because without the rules, you can't coexist and you can't become disciplined.
What does it mean to align your soul with the structure of being? Because this sentence,
yes, okay.
it fascinated me, but I still cannot articulate in a concrete way what it means. It has to do with speaking the truth when facing chaos.
Yeah, because it's partly because, you see, this is something I would really like people to take away from 12 Rules of Life. It's like, there's a chapter in there called Do What Is Meaningful, Not What Is Expedient, and it lays out two pathways. The thing about telling the truth that's so adventurous is that you let go of what you want, and you replace it with a hypothesis. It's the hypothesis of faith. And the hypothesis is, it doesn't matter what I want, because I don't know even what I should want. Instead, I can say, I'm going to make a claim, and a philosophical claim, that if I tell the truth as carefully as I can, then whatever happens is the best that could have possibly happened in that situation, no matter how it looks.
Yeah.
Right. And
that's profound.
Well, but it's adventurous. That's the thing that's so fun about it. And I think this is also why it's not merely you should bow down to the rules, because that's sort of a slave mentality in some sense, right? I mean, you have to be a slave to things. You have to be disciplined. So I'm not denying the utility of following the rules, but telling the truth is much more dynamic than that, because you don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. And you don't care. Or maybe to put it more precisely, as I said, you assume that whatever happens is the right thing.
Yeah.
And then it was so exciting to me last year when I was doing the biblical lectures to understand finally that the link between the idea of God employing the logos to create habitable order and saying that it was good. Said, okay, so that's the deepest reflection of that idea. The idea is that the being that you speak forth from potential with truth is good. Yeah. It's like that That might be true.
Yeah.
Well, Jesus, just think what it would be like if that was true.
Yeah.
It's the key. It's like, well, how do you set things right? Tell the truth.
I've actually come to think during the past 2 years that if you honestly speak the truth, it makes you, and well, not indestructible, but it does kind of make your soul indestructible. And I think the archetypes are referred to, Maximus, Hector, Leonidas, all men who spoke the truth. They were all defeated in the end, but their soul was not broken when they
Socrates
were defeated.
is the best example of that, because we know, the thing about Socrates that's so cool is that, many things, is that, there's arguments about the historical reality of Christ, and there's arguments about the historical reality of the Buddha and Muhammad as well. There's no arguments about the historical reality of Socrates. He lived, and we have 2 transcripts of his trial from 2 different people. Yeah. And they basically, and I outlined this again in the same chapter about doing what is meaningful and not what is expedient. When Socrates, when he was accused of corrupting the youth of Athens, there was a game that was going on. It was a political game. And Socrates was a gadfly, right? He bothered people because he kept asking them questions, He wanted to know the answers. He'd ask them questions, and then the people he was questioning would find out that they didn't know the answers, and that was very disturbing to them, And so they all got together. Athens was a small city by our standards, only 25,000 people. Everyone knew everyone, like seriously, right? And all the local aristocracy got together and said, God, we're sick of this guy. Why don't we tell him we're going to put him on trial? And sort of hint that he should get the hell out of town. That was the game. Yeah. So that, they announced the trial, and everyone knew it was going to be a fixed outcome. But the idea was, well, we'll announce it 6 months ahead of time, and he can have a colloquy with his friends and get out of town, and then we'll be rid of him, and that'll be the end of that. Well, and Socrates knew that this was the game, and so did his friends. And they all got together and said, well, we got to get you out of town. And Socrates was thinking, yeah, that's probably a good idea, because, I don't want to be dead. And then he went off and had a little consultation with his conscience, his daemon, he called it. I think you actually pronounce it demon, but it means conscience for our purposes. And he went and had a conference with it, and he was thinking internally, consulting his conscience, and it said, don't run away. And he thought, well, really? What do you mean, don't run away? These people want to kill me. They're going to kill me. What do you mean, don't run away? And his conscience said, don't run away. Don't run away. That's how it is. You're not to run away. And Socrates came back and told his friends, okay, I went and talked to my conscience, and he said, the one thing that makes me different from all other men is that when my conscience tells me not to do something, I stop. It doesn't tell me what to do. It tells me what not to do, and then I don't do it, no matter what. That's what made me who I am. And he said, the Delphic Oracle had said for her part, he said at his trial that he was the wisest man, and she was very highly regarded, right? Whatever she was doing with her hallucinogenic tricks, she was the mouthpiece of the gods, and said that Socrates was the wisest man in Greece, and we still remember him. He didn't run, and then he thought, okay, well, if my conscience is correct, let's assume that for a minute. Weird as that is, because how could it be correct? But it's always been correct before. He said, well, look, and he said this at his trial, I'm old. I've been renowned for my clarity of thought. I'm going to die not so long from now. And so now I have this opportunity to put my affairs in order and to say goodbye to everyone and to live the remainder of my life with integrity and to say what I have to say. And then at his trial, he just flips the table and he goes after the people who are prosecuting him. And you see why they want him dead. It's devastating. It's devastating. And so, we know the story 2,500 years later, 3,000 years later. And that's a reflection of exactly what you said, is that part of the spirit doesn't die. Yeah. Now, what does that mean?
I think it means that it dies when you corrupt yourself.
Well, that's what Solzhenitsyn said in the Gulag Archipelago. He said there's something worse than death. That's a good thing to know. Yeah. And that's the death of your soul. And that's whether the soul is immortal or not. It's a psychological idea. It's like there are conditions under which it would be better not to live. Well, that's the cry for freedom, I would say. You know? So, because life without truth is hell. Yeah. That's the right way of looking at it.
Yeah. Strong stuff.
That's for sure. Well, you need strong stuff.
Yeah, I know.
Life is hard.